Welcome back, everyone, to another video. It's been a very dramatic week, astrologically speaking, after the solar eclipse in Aries. Now, the drama and the changes are not going anywhere. We are very much in that intense 10-day period where the astrology just goes a little bit berserko, and it's going to be a little bit hard to tell which feature of the astrology is prompting which events, which feelings, or which experience in your life. So I guess that's just a little bit of a heads up, is just to sort of ride the waves as they come through. Now, I've already done a video on the solar eclipse in Aries, so I don't want to repeat myself in respect to that. But I do want to kind of share a few thoughts and a few insights around the qualities of dark and light, which is also a little bit reflected in the idea of the Mercury Cazimi as well. Before I get to that, though, I just would love to make a very, very quick announcement that my Contemporary Astrology Program is open for enrollment, taking in a new group of students, and we start on June 6th. So if you're keen to learn more about astrology, if you're keen to brush up on the basics or get some new perspectives on the astrology that you already know, you're more than welcome to join us. I'll pop a link in the description below. The course is run on an app which you can access on a device, online. There are so many features and functionalities where you get access to me through chats, through the other students, and we develop a really lovely community there with each group. So as I said, if you are curious to learn more, change your life as it did with me when I first started astrology almost 20 years ago, it'll be 20 years ago later this year. I just had a curiosity, an interest with no other real aspirations or aims with it. And here I am on YouTube, which I still feel weird about. But anyway, here I am. So we did have an eclipse earlier in the week. And this is such an interesting phenomenon when you think about the philosophy of it all. We live in a world where we are so dependent on those luminaries, the luminary of the day and the luminary of the night. In the culture that we're from and in the timeline that we're on, we very much value that solar light. In a sense, when people kind of mention things like patriarchy or what have you, it is the idea that it is a very solar world, a very yang world, and where we really value clarity, progress, ambition, and things of that nature. Visibility is sort of really important. And even in the fact of, or in the area rather of, social media and things like that. I'm a beholder of Saturn in Leo. So the idea of being very visible in a video situation wasn't something that it took me, let's put it this way, it took me a really long time to wrap my head around that concept. So the idea that the subtlety of darkness is something that isn't revered or respected a great deal. So we do tend to prefer light even if that means we don't like what we see. So even when we're working as astrologers and we are looking at the functionality or the ability of a planet to function, we're often seeing it from the perspective of the more light a planet has access to, the better it's going to perform or function. And that is particularly the case when we're speaking around lunar phases. So when we are talking about bright lights, when we are talking about the more light, the more access to opportunity, there's also a harshness about that and a definite lack of subtlety. And you go online, on Instagram, what have you have a look at all the pretty pictures, and there's not a great deal out there anymore that is subtle. And in some ways, the dark is frightening. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, like I was, the dark is, what was it? The night is dark and full of terrors. So there's a certain safety in light. There's a certain clarity. There's a certain known. If you try and walk anywhere blindfolded, we really lose our faculties. So we really do, generally speaking, prefer the light. There are people, and there are some personalities, of course, that do prefer the dark. There are some aspects to being that also doesn't need to go under the glaring light all of the time. That harsh glaze of the sun. I mean, me being as pale as I am, I'm better off not being in the sun. But skin aside, there are some elements of our relationships with others, the relationships we have with ourselves, that are generally better off being a little bit subtle, hidden, or unknown to, the greater sphere. We kind of know a lot more about people nowadays, at least a version of their reality, thanks to social media. When we think about the moon, and we often say, she illuminates the dark and she illuminates the night. I don't think that's entirely true. I think it's more that she offers enough glimmer, silvery glimmer, to show us the beauty of the dark. It's the subtlety, the virtues of the hidden. And when we talk about light, light is a whole subject of its own. We often think about it as, being enlightened and awakened. You wake up and you see something and you know something due to light that you didn't know before. But we don't often talk about very much about the virtues of subtlety, the virtues of the hidden, the virtues of the intimacy that can arise when we don't know something, the curiosity when we don't get to see everything. And I'm not just talking about from a visual standpoint, but when we don't know something, naturally curiosity gets aroused. Too much light can almost be obnoxious and quite vulgar. But when we have a little bit of darkness, there's something, we might ask, oh, what if? Or we might be inspired to ask questions. So we're in this week where we've just had the bright light of the sun eclipsed by a much smaller body, which is the moon. So the moon has, rendered temporarily the sun in the dark, in the middle of the day. So this week we have been shown the power of darkness, the power of what it might be like when we don't have the glaring light of the sun all of the time. And for a little bit this week, the moon, the art of subtlety, the art of mystery, the art of that sort of yin gentleness, almost exoticness, mysterious, mystique is probably a word that we could use. When something is subtle, it can have a lot more power. It invites, as I said, curiosity, it invites investigation. And there's something very alluring and inviting about something that we don't have all the answers to, or we don't have all the details around. And so the moon proved her power this week. Now, at the end of the week, we get Mercury forms a similar function as the moon. And while he sort of doesn't really cover the face of the sun in the way that the moon has, it does fuse with the sun, form the Cazimi in the retrograde phase after the sun has just been eclipsed. Now, if we think about the sun, it is in Aries, and that's the sun sign of exaltation. It's the Mars's place of domicile. And all of that together is very hot. It's very dry. It's very yang. It's very forceful, cardinal fire. There's nothing subtle or anything about the energy of Aries. So in a sense, Mercury is in the depths of its synodic cycle. It is as dark as it gets. It is in, the bowels of the underworld, proverbially speaking. And so part of this Cazimi is that it fuses with the sun it switches places with the sun and it rises up in its synodic cycle as a morning star. And so when when a planet rises as the morning star, it becomes, at least in Mercury's case, it becomes more verbal. Okay, it has a little bit more to say. It's a little bit, younger. It's more empowered. It's like giving Mercury the microphone and voicing something. But now is not the time to voice the thing. Okay, we're in this dark, shadowy, eclipsy energy. And so when I think about Mercury, I feel all the time Mercury just does not get enough credit in astrology. It is so much more historically um, than just logistics, planning, communication, IT going down, although it is all of those things in sort of ancient philosophy. The heart and the mind were very much uh, linked to the sun and Mercury. So the heart being the sun, mind Mercury. And when we go through these retrograde cycles, it reminds us how far the mind has strayed away from the heart. And then Mercury kind of gets his proverbial chain like yanked on by the sun, and the mind comes back to the heart. And that's what the inferior conjunction of Mercury is very much about. I've already done a video about that. I'll pop a link in the notes below. I think it's about the meaning of Mercury Cazimi, and I talk about that at a philosophical level. And so when we're talking about Mercury in Aries in particular, it's one of those type of energies that will just sort of, at worst, it's just going to blurt things out. It's going to make that tweet, or, what do you call it now? Like you make that X on X. I don't know, but you tweet on X, or you put the Facebook status, or you do whatever. You say something to someone and you've sort of got that foot and mouth, or you've acted out, you've said something, and you just wish the floor would swallow you up. But when Mercury is retrograde, it's just fusing with a newly eclipsed sun. It's showing us the power of the unspoken. It's showing us the power of the unsaid. And not every little thought you have or feeling that you have needs to be expressed. Not everything needs to be shared. And that there's something really powerful and transformative when sometimes you just keep your thoughts to yourself, or you just shut up, Not everyone wants to hear what it is you have to say. And sometimes when you can think about like those thoughts or those feelings within yourself, you actually give yourself the opportunity to change your own mind, to empower yourself. And sometimes there are times where silence is actually the better outcome than saying things. Not saying that saying things is a bad thing. There's a time and a place to speak. I really feel the energy of now is to, forever hold the peace. The speak now will come a little bit later down the track. So, as I said, some things are best left unsaid or unspoken. Some conversations will just go around in circles, and sometimes it's just best to just walk away, let it be, and feel the feelings of the unspoken, feel the feelings of maybe not texting that person that you're in a texting situation with, get yourself out of that anxiety loop. The thing is that Mercury is in Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars in Pisces, which is sort of a mute energy. It's a watery, emotional sign, and it's showing us that sometimes we just have to stop speaking and actually feel what we're going through. It doesn't necessarily have to be verbalized. It doesn't necessarily have to be shared, but sometimes just holding things in, sometimes working things out for ourselves, is actually where the power is. And I'd like for you just to maybe think about that as a part of this Mercury Cazimi. It might be the turnaround point of a decision that you need to make, a conversation that you may eventually need to have. And that's probably going to be a better time when Mercury is visible again in about a week or so. So actually probably, yeah, about a week or so. I should have figured that out, but I've got Neptune squaring my own Mercury right now, so details are a little bit foggy. But whenever Mercury gets about 15 degrees away from the sun is where we're coming back to that idea of visibility. But for this week anyway, trying to keep the energy a little bit contained is to really maybe just hold the thought. If you are in a situation where there is opposition or an opponent or an adversary, keeping your cards close to your chest is usually a winning strategy. And sometimes that can be the case on the personal level as well. So, just some food for thought about the art of subtlety, and that light is not always what we need for this week. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the astrology. I'd love to hear your experiences around the eclipse. And I really wish you the best of the energy that's to come. And I'll see you again next week.